People First from the Construction Life Studio. Great to be back here again. This is tremendously unique, exciting, and you can't write this shit the way that it just unfolds. Michelle, thanks for being here. I invited you here, and you accepted sort of I'm going to use the word mission right off the bat. And one of the first things that sort of came out of your mouth was something to the effect of, well, I'm not your ideal audience. And then there's like imposter syndrome that sets in, and I call bullshit and I call all that because you are no different than anybody else. Many people who sit there say all that. Thanks for making this happen. It's pretty cool.
Thank you, Jonathan. You've had some incredible guests on your podcast. That's where that imposter syndrome, as you call it, was coming from.
So, tell the world out there, who are you as a human being?
Well, to an alien, I would say I'm Canadian. I actually live in Nova Scotia, so shout out to any Nova Scotian or even East Coast Maritime listeners out there. I would say my personality is like the perfect combination of compassion, empathy, and drive with kind of like a no bullshit attitude. I tend to be pretty blunt and honest to a fault. So yeah, that's how I would describe myself. So
what the hell stops you from saying, well, I'm not your ideal candidate? Because you just described a wonderful human being and that's who's on the show. So where does that come from?
Yeah, I mean, we all have our kind of deep-rooted esteem kind of issues, and the people that I've watched on your podcast just have maybe more experience than I have in business and in life.
Okay, so can I challenge that?
Sure.
Because you exemplify a people first approach in so many things of much of the work you do, and that's exactly why we're here today, because it's talking about leading with a human centric approach, and much of your life has pivoted through doing exactly that, is showing up for other human beings and being there for them. And that is to me, you don't get much more real, raw, and authentic than that.
Yeah, it's true. Thank you.
So, pivot right into that for the audience out there. Professionally now, like where you are today is not where you always started, and yet it's so unique and it's so wonderful, and it illuminates so many blind spots for me that I didn't even know existed until I speak to you. Tell the audience out there the space you occupy today and the journey to get there.
Yeah, so I work in nonprofit for a very small nonprofit based out of Nova Scotia called the Society for Enterprise Education and Development. And what I do is I'm the program facilitator for an online, so completely virtual, employment program for youth ages 15 to 21 who are in the foster care system or who are at risk of being connected to the Department of Community Services in some way. So that could mean that their parents are on social assistance, so we would call that a dependent. Maybe they're in the justice system, they're dealing with some legal issues. So teens at risk. I run a program twice a year where we do twice weekly workshops for 12 weeks and teach them all about employability. And then we find them an 8-week work placement in their community so they can try out some of the skills that they've learned and get some work experience.
Okay, cool. Like that's the metrics and that's the logistics behind it all. But let's let's simplify that. So now you're dealing with 15-year-old human beings, children. They're still children at 15. They're going through a transition stage, and I think it's a wonderful age. Up to, how old did you say they were?
21.
Up to 21. What brings somebody into your orbit? Like what brings somebody into your world? How do they even connect with you?
So most of the folks I deal with are referred to the program by, let's say, their social worker, or so like someone who works with the Department of Community Services. If you're in the foster care system, you'll have a social worker. So they would refer us to the program. That's where we find the bulk of our people. But really anyone can self-refer as long as you fit in those parameters. So we do some kind of advertising and stuff like that. But a lot of the folks that we support are coming from a recommendation by their social worker that just they think the program would be a good fit for them. They want to get a job, but they've never had one. Maybe they have some barriers to employment. And so that's what we support them with.
So 12-week program gets in the education needed and placement.
12 weeks plus an 8-week placement.
Plus the
24 workshops and then an 8-week placement.
By the time somebody comes to you at 15, what have they already tried?
A lot of the people in the program, I would say probably over 75%, have never had a job before. So they're coming in with nothing. They have no experience. Also keep in mind, a lot of them, though not all of them, but over 80%, don't have parents or don't have their parents in their life or don't have consistent adult role models. Maybe they grew up in group homes. Maybe they're in a foster home. So they haven't had maybe as much guidance as someone who's had like a stable home environment for their whole life. So they're coming in with not a lot of experience, some significant barriers. Oftentimes they have maybe a disability or a mental health challenge that they're working through. Some of them have addictions, issues, a lot of lower socioeconomics, things like that.
I got to make assumptions, so let's just unpack this for the audience. There's got to be a lot of resistance upon entering a program.
Yeah, so we do an intake interview with them and we kind of ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, like, what's your motivation for the program? You know, like, where are you at when you're coming in? Because it is kind of a red flag for me if a kid's like, yeah, I'm just doing it because my social worker signed me up. I don't really care. I don't really want to be here. But there's 3 phases to the program. And the first phase, we call it if you want. So if you want is like, come give it a try, see how it goes for you, see if it works for you. And we tend to lose between 20 and 30% in phase 1, which is the first 6 weeks.
How long is, so 6 weeks. So 6 weeks is, so if you want is 6 weeks of, am I attending virtual in-class sessions?
They're virtual twice a week. Yeah. So 2-hour workshops twice a week.
Okay.
And then they have to also do an individual session with, I have a co-facilitator, so with one of us, which is an hour a week as well. And they get paid for all this time, so that's a bit of an incentive. There's also a lot of other incentives we offer in the program. But yeah, we just say, we very rarely don't accept someone into the program. So we just say, come and try.
Yeah, but in their capacity, there's got to be a limit to say we can only, I mean, there's only so many resources you can lean into.
Yeah, we have a limit of the number of people we can accept. And so far, we've only reached that limit one time and had to put people on the wait list. But we can accept about 45 people. So,
okay, what happens if you do nothing? Like, if this program never exists, what happens with the majority of these folks?
I would say that they would just continue to struggle with employment and just not have the skills to be successful in employment. I think what we do a really good job of in the program is going by what employers say that they're looking for. And I do a lot of curriculum creation. I didn't create it from scratch, but I have significantly added to the curriculum. And we kind of ask employers, like, what are the top employability skills that you're looking for? And then we focus on those skills. So I think, you know, some people learn by doing, for sure, like trial and error. Like, you get a job, maybe you get fired, maybe you hate it and you quit and you try a bunch of different things. But what we try to do is give them a base of foundation that's will help them access any job. So, you know, for example, teamwork. We teach teamwork and we practice teamwork. That's a skill you're going to use in every job, right? So we do a lot of hard skills and a lot of soft skills as well.
How do we create awareness, right? Awareness from the, I guess, participants of the program is the only word that comes to mind, but also the employers, right? Like, how do you get employers on board to say, hell yeah, I want to be part of this, or no, I don't?
Yeah, I would say the hardest aspect of my job is getting employers on board. We're obviously looking for employers who we would consider inclusive, because a lot of these folks have multiple barriers. So yes, they're in foster care, but maybe they also have an addiction issue, or they're in the justice system, or they have a disability. So that's the hardest part. We do pay for the youth. So it's a 8-week placement up to 20 hours a week, subsidized by my organization. So the business is getting a free employee. All we ask is
for 8 weeks.
Is that they mentor the youth and support the youth and allow us to step in and support the youth as well. So if there's an issue, we just ask that the employer let us know so that we can kind of coach the youth on, how they can improve on this issue.
How does that go? Like my brain goes to construction, right? So, I mean, I don't know how many construction organizations are out there that would be interested to join this program, but I'd be tremendously curious, and maybe we'll pivot to that in a bit. How do the employers respond? They'll call Michelle, Jonathan's not showing up. He hasn't shown up 3 days this week. What happens next?
So we do some vetting of the employer beforehand. We make sure that we have a conversation with them about the individual youth we're placing there. So if I have a concern about the youth, I'm going to let them know, this youth struggles with time management. They're going to need reminders on their phone when break times are, or to come back for breaks, or they're going to need some support from their social worker or their group home staff to get on the right bus at the right time, things like that. The first couple weeks, could we be a little bit lenient with them? This is their first time taking the bus, for example, or they have to travel an hour, for example. So we're very transparent with employers because we want the relationship to be positive the whole way through, and we want, most importantly, the youth to succeed. So we're looking for employers who are going to be okay with accommodations that might be required, or, just understanding that this person has never had a job before. They've never had to clock in and out. They've never had to work in a team. They've never had to do these things apart from what we teach them in the program. So we try to be really transparent, and then we try to offer as much support as possible, just helping them in any way we can to be successful right from the beginning.
So it sounds like there's a bit of an onboarding process that occurs with the employer.
Definitely, yeah. We want to make sure that the employer understands the program, the purpose of the program, and what we're looking for them to, we don't always get it right, of course. Sometimes we've had employers that haven't worked out very well at all. And sometimes we have youth who don't do very well for a variety of reasons, and that can kind of burn the bridge. But we just try our best to be transparent and to make it clear to them that we're looking for them to mentor and support this young person who doesn't have a lot of positive role models usually, and who's never had a job before. So the expectations need to be according to that.
Interesting. There's so much more here that we're going to come back to. But let's back up. Let's rewind a little bit. This is where you are today. This wasn't where your journey started. Mm-hmm. Did you know at some point you were going to end up here?
No. I mean, my job is so unique and a little bit obscure. A lot of people don't know that these programs exist, that people do. My job is not a job that people kind of say they want to do when they grow up, right? I started in journalism. I have a bachelor's degree in journalism. That was from a long time ago. And then I went back to school for mental health and addictions because of personal experiences that I had, not myself as an addict, but with people I loved who were kind of had some substance use issues. And I found it interesting kind of from a clinical standpoint, and wanted to learn more about what's going on with this and the psychology around it, but also just wanted to learn how I could support those individuals and other people who are dealing with substance use disorders. So I went back to school for mental health and addictions, and then I started working. I got really passionate about housing first. So I started working with people experiencing homelessness in homeless shelters. I was living in Victoria, BC at that time. So that's how I got started, right on the front lines.
So hang out in that space for a little bit. You're in Victoria, from there you decide to take the audience there. It's literally dealing with people on the streets.
Yeah, so I worked in what we called supported housing. Mm-hmm. So it was a kind of an apartment building where people who were experiencing homelessness, there's a long wait list and stuff, but eventually you get your own little apartment, but it's supported housing. So there's always a staff there to help with whatever any of the residents needed. So I started working there, kind of shift work on the front lines, supporting those individuals in that building.
What do you learn there? What does that experience take you, if you can even recall back there? Because now you had no idea you were going to end up there. You take a journalism degree for whatever reason. You take a journalism degree, then you become curious about mental health and addiction, again, sort of an unorthodox pathway, and then you end up there. So what now? What?
Yeah, I mean, the journalism was kind of like, I didn't really know what to do. And, you know, one of my teachers in high school was like, well, you're a really good writer. Why don't you be a writer? And I was like, well, like, what? Write what? Like, what do you mean? And then I have always been really passionate about social justice issues. And I thought that journalism would be a good way for me to kind of, I wanted to just get the truth out there, get the story out there. And then I kind of realized that that was like a little bit idealistic, and it wasn't the most straightforward path to help people. Ultimately, what I wanted to do and what I've always wanted to do is just help people. So working on the front lines, I think I learned that everybody has a story. And I think if I didn't grow up in such a privileged way, I probably would have gone into social work right from the beginning. But I'm going to admit that I didn't even know what social work was, because I never knew anybody who had a social worker or was a social worker. I never met a social worker in my life. So yeah, I wanted to help people. I wanted to be a nurse, but I didn't do very well in like chemistry, biology, all that kind of stuff. So I was like, you know, human services made a lot of sense. And then when I kind of coupled that with my interest in psychology and mental health and addictions, then I kind of got to, I just kind of got to focus on what I wanted to do. And the front lines is just where everybody starts with that stuff. You start, because that's where you really experience, like I would recommend anybody who wants to get into helping people start, even just volunteering at a homeless shelter, working with the unhoused, really opens your eyes, because I think there's a lot of stigma around that population. And I'm going to tell you it's not true.
What do you mean? Stigma how?
Stigma that people, well, they just don't want to work, they're lazy.
Okay.
Or, well, what do you mean you're an addict? Just stop. That's not true. None of that's true. Addiction is a disease, just like diabetes. It needs treatment and it needs empathy. It takes a lot of hard work to get out of that cycle, especially if it's generational, especially if there's other factors involved like mental illness, socioeconomic status, racial injustice. All of these things are compounding. So what I really learned coming from such a privileged background is that you can't make assumptions about why someone is where they are. Sometimes bad shit just happens to good people and they need a little help.
So what do you suggest instead?
As a way to look at it?
Sure.
Look at the individual person and their individual situation. I met so many people living on the street who, you know, got injured in a car accident and were prescribed, you know, Percocet by their doctor. And then they became addicted to it and their doctor never followed up. They couldn't get any more. It's an addiction. And they, you know, tried to buy it on the street and then they couldn't get it. So they tried heroin and that's it. Or, you know, someone's whole family died in a car accident and they lost their house and they lost their job because they were grieving. And that's where they end up. And they just need some support. Not everybody on the street, you know, there's definitely a very small percentage of people who just don't fit into society in the traditional way and they're choosing to live rough because they don't want to subscribe to that whole society thing. But a lot of the people in those situations, they want to get out of those situations, but they need some help getting past that, getting out of the addiction, if that's the case, support with their mental health, if that's the case. You know, it's pretty hard not to be depressed when you're in that situation, and it's pretty hard to get out of that depression when your situation is still the same. So just having a little bit more compassion, empathy, and understanding and openness to not make assumptions about why someone might be in the situation that they're in.
How do you learn all that? How do you approach somebody like that? You know, again, debunk the stigmatism that people on the streets, A, want to be on the streets, and it's a compounded question, so hang in there. You know, A, they want to be on the streets, but B is like, they don't give a shit, they're not going to talk to you anyways. What do you say to somebody who says that?
They're just a person. They're an individual person. like any other person that you would talk to. And I try very hard in any situation to just speak to the person one-on-one as an individual, figure out their story, where they're coming from. And even if I disagree with them, just listen to their perspective or their story. I met some truly incredible people doing that work who I remember to this day and still think about and wonder where they are. You know, some of them might be dead. I don't know.
What do you mean? You say you met some people that were doing some remarkable work, people that mentored you?
No, like people who were unhoused at the time, who told me their story, how they got there and what they want out of their life. You know, I wonder where those people are now because...
Hang on. Is there something that resonates with you? Is there like a story that sticks in your head of, you know, an individual that you didn't know what you didn't know until you did?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for confidentiality, I'll be really vague, but I met someone who was a sniper in the military for a lot of years, and he had a lot of trauma from that. And I think it's fair to say, although I'm not an expert, that that is a very difficult job to do. It takes a psychological toll, and we don't do a great job in our society of supporting folks in those situations. So he didn't get the proper diagnosis. He didn't get the proper help, and his life just fell apart. At a certain point, and maybe, you know, if anyone's experienced this firsthand with their loved ones, there's only so much capacity you have as a helper or as a loved one to support a person in that situation. They need to want to get help, they need to be willing, and the help needs to be available and accessible to them. So this guy, he just couldn't get past some of the things that he did in that job. And he just needed some help to work through that so that he could continue on with his life and not have the guilt that he had for what he did, and not have the kind of mental images and mental weight that he was carrying.
Okay. So was he ready for the help?
Yeah, I mean, he was living in that supported housing development and trying to get some treatment at that time, yeah.
Okay, so if I throw out a statement here, what lands with you, what resonates, is that, you know, the adage of you can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped. What shows up for you when I say that statement?
You have to meet people where they're at.
Ooh, what do you mean?
So if you're an addict and I'm not, then I might say, well, why do you want to live like that? Why do you want to be a slave to it? Just stop. You need to stop. But maybe you're not ready. Maybe you have other things you have to work for, and the addiction is filling a void for you. You have to want to do the work to clean up what's in your head. All of us do. Whether you, like, no matter where you're coming from, what your background is, we all have stuff that we carry from our childhood, from our adulthood, from traumas, from, you know, biases that we have, all this stuff. And if we want to grow as human beings, we need to work through and process that information, keep what you want, and throw the rest out. You know, what's serving me, what isn't. So I think sometimes we assume that, you know, people in those situations just are unwilling, maybe, but maybe they're just not ready. Maybe what happened to them is so horrible that they'll never get over it. Some of the things that people have to deal with in this life are truly horrifying.
So what do you do as a human being to truly connect with them, to learn all you can?
Yeah, I mean, meet them where they're at is the number one thing I try to keep in mind.
Okay, but hang on. If you're going to say that, let's pull out handbrake here. Like, unpack what that actually means to the audience. Because, you know, you hear that sort of often. Just meet them. What does it actually mean in your world?
It means what do you want? Where are you now? So with the youth I'm working with, you know, I want a job.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's why you're in the program, sure. But what are you good at? What do you like? What skills do you already have? What skills do you want to build on?
How do you extrapolate that from there? Because the easy thing to say is, I don't know, haven't thought about it, I don't know. How do you extrapolate that?
I think for young people, especially, talking about what their interests are and relating that to work. So the number one interest of young people is video games.
Okay.
But video games, even though they get a bad rap sometimes from, parents or, too much screen time or whatever, they actually teach you a lot. You're problem solving, you're working in teams, you're communicating, hand-eye coordination, you're learning all these things. So if I've got a kid and all they like is video games, then I'll talk to them about, well, what's your favorite game? Cool. Well, what do you do in that game? Like, what's that game about? Oh, okay. So it's like a shooting game. So are you on a team? Oh, you're on a team. So do you play with your friends? So are you talking to your friends when you're playing? Maybe they say to me like, I want to work, but I don't want to work with people because I don't like talking to people.
Sure.
Well, that's very common. So like, in what situations in your life are you having conversations? What do those conversations look like? Why do you feel like you're bad at that? Like, we're having a conversation right now. It's going great.
So this is interesting, right? And what you're talking about is you're actually becoming part of somebody else's world. You're asking them very leading questions, how questions. You're provoking thinking, which I think is beautiful. Rather than providing unsolicited opinions, say, well, like video game shit, get off that thing because it's just melting your brain, or whatever biases and presuppositions you want to carry forward. And for the folks out there who are listening and going, oh, you guys are talking about fluffy bullshit that's hard, heavy, and exhausting. How do you deal with all that? Because it must get heavy at times.
Absolutely, yeah. Self-care. We teach this to the youth as well. We have a whole kind of mental health workshop, and we talk about self-care a lot. What do you do for you that's just for you, that brings you joy, that fills you up? And also finding those activities, I call them flow activities, those activities where you're just like so in the moment that you don't notice time, or you don't notice your body, if you're sore, if you're tired, because you're just enjoying yourself so much. So finding those things and encouraging other people to do that as well, and sharing those experiences with other people in the moment. That's how I
so I got that. I want to pull the hand, but get specific. What's a flow moment for you? What's something you do that you just lose? You're so enamored, you lose track of time.
Yeah. So for me, yoga is one of those things. I've been practicing yoga for 17 years. I also really love bird watching, and I've gotten into wildlife photography lately. And I really love that as well. Anywhere near a body of water, going to the beach, walking my dogs, and hanging out with people.
People, interesting. Okay, thank you for all this. So I want to we're jumping around a little bit, and I appreciate you for this. So you're in Vancouver, you're on the front lines. From there, you pivot to...
Yeah, so from the front lines, I got burnt out pretty quickly. I moved to Halifax for personal reasons, not for...
1 second.
Yeah.
Go back to there. Like, this is the shit that I don't want to... I just sift over. When you talk about you got burnt out...
Yeah.
Tell us more.
At that time, so this was like almost a decade ago, I was, fresh out of school. And yeah, in school, they taught us how to let go of that stuff, but not really. You just kind of have to learn. So you have a really heavy day and you figure out, well, like, how do I get rid of this? Maybe someone passed away. Maybe someone got arrested. Maybe we had to call the ambulance. I've had to deal with overdoses, things like that. So I didn't have the skills at that time to deal with that heavy stuff. And it wasn't working. So
how do you know it wasn't working?
I felt heavy. I felt I was carrying it around. I wasn't letting it go. So when you are in a profession that's helping other people, you take that energy and you hold that space for people, but you have to find a way to let it go and release it, because it's not yours to carry, right? And I didn't have those skills yet. So I did do that for a few years. Even when I moved to Halifax, I still was working on the front lines for a bit. And then I wanted to get into more advocacy, so nonprofit, more advocacy instead of frontline work. And I just happened to fall into disability advocacy from there. So my initial kind of thought was, well, I wanted to get into housing advocacy because I had all this experience with unhoused. I knew how important it was.
1 second for clarity.
Yeah.
When you talk about advocacy, you're talking about creating awareness.
Creating awareness and, supporting more on a society level.
Okay, so now we're talking about creating awareness around disability. Go on.
Yeah, so then I applied for a couple of jobs I was underqualified for, but I was like, I'll just give it a try. I went to an interview for a job that's actually really similar to what I'm doing now, but I didn't have the experience at that time. And they didn't hire me, but they recommended me for a different job, which was like an entry-level program facilitator job at a disability organization. And I interviewed for that job and I got it. And that's where I started and kind of got into what I'm into now. So that I did for a few years, like 2.5 at that same organization, running an employment program for adults with disabilities of all kinds.
So this is anybody above the age of 21?
18. It was 18 to 30, that program.
So can we hang out here for a moment?
Yeah.
Unpack what this... I understand. We've had some conversations, so I understand this, but not everybody understands this. Unpack what this actually looks like between the ages of 18 and 30, how people come into orbit, what the intention is, and what the outcome could be.
So that program was really small because this was kind of like, it was like the year before COVID, and then it went into COVID, so we had to kind of make the classes really small. So right now, where I have like 45 people in a program, this was an in-person program and we had only 10 people. But their disability needs were varying. So some people might have had maybe a mental illness, whereas some people would have had maybe a physical disability, but they're all in the same class learning the same thing.
Okay.
And my original job was to focus on, create the curriculum for, and teach 9 employability skills. And that's all I was hired for.
What are the 9 employee? Do you remember them? What
Yeah.
are the 9 employee employment, whatever it is?
Motivation, adaptability, confidence, presentation, teamwork, accountability.
Okay, these sound like pretty. These sound like pretty,
Motivation. Did I say that? Yeah.
Well, these sound like, I think you named 7 of 9. So good.
Time management.
Good on the memory, right? 8 of 9 now. These are very universal.
Right. We call them soft skills.
Okay.
So soft skills are skills that you can use at any job. All people need these skills to work in any job. Whereas a hard skill is like, I can drive a forklift.
Even just show up as a human being, you need these skills.
Yeah.
Time management, right?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Stress management, that was the other one.
Well, there's 9 out of 9.
So my job was and I had zero experience, like I didn't know, but I was going off a framework that we were using. Basically I had this book and it was like, here's what motivation is. It was like a paragraph and I had to create an 1.5-hour workshop about
How'd that go for you?
I loved it.
Okay.
Yeah. I did a ton of research. I love doing research. The journalism degree really helped with that because I was really good at doing research already and writing, obviously. So yeah, I wrote these workshops and then I taught them to the people in that program. And then the job just progressed from there. I started creating more curriculum, teaching more things, and then I eventually became the program manager of that program and 2 other programs. So yeah, that was a cool job.
Okay, so hang on. These folks come to you at 18 years old because what's happened up until this point in their life?
they have what we call barriers to employment. So for these folks, most of them had jobs before and they tried to work. Maybe they can get a job, but they can't keep it. Or maybe they really suck at interviews, so no one ever hires them. Or maybe their disability is severe enough that they need to request an accommodation and they don't know how.
Can we stop there for a second? Because that word keeps coming up. So why don't we succinctly unpack that? Disability. Like when somebody says disability to me and disability to you and disability to Angelina or Jim or anybody else out there, that word has different stigmas attached to it, different definitions. What does disability mean to you?
Okay. To me, a disability is a physical or a mental condition that limits a person's ability to participate fully in society and live without any barriers in an equitable way with everyone else. So can I give you an example?
Yeah, it sounds really like, fluffy, cool. And I appreciate you for that. And I'm not calling you out on it. I'm saying I got all that. It sounds like, there's your journalism degree showing up. But what does it actually mean? So
like ideally for everybody, we would live in an inclusive, or what we would call in kind of disability advocacy, a universally designed society where it's inclusive for everybody. So let's say you're in a wheelchair, just because this is a kind of easy disability for everyone to kind of visualize. You use a mobility device, you're in a wheelchair, and you live in a town with no stairs.
Okay.
Do you have a disability? No, because you can get everywhere in town that you need to go. So you can participate fully. This is oversimplified, right? Obviously, there's things that you can't do. You're in a wheelchair for a reason. But in terms of getting around town, going to the store like everybody else, doing the things everybody else is doing, if there's no stairs for you, there's no barrier.
Okay, I love that. And can I challenge that?
Yeah.
Because there's a bunch of folks out there, especially the construction mindset orientation. This is, again, my bias is stepping in and say, what if we said you're full of shit and that's kind of like a utopia world? How do you build a society that has no stairs, or we're using stairs, but how do you build a society that, it's not physically possible to have no stairs. There's stairs for a reason. We need elevation changes. We need, the pragmatic part of your brain comes and says, well, so what now what? Like,
yeah, so
I'm not challenging it to be confrontational. I'm challenging it to become curious.
Yeah, I meant that example to be an oversimplification and pretty reductionist, but the idea is, how can we listen to the people who are saying, hey, I want to do this thing that everyone else is doing, but it's not accessible to me, and make it accessible. So that's why we have ramps, elevators, doors that open automatically for people. That's why we have, when we cross the street, the sounds for people who are visually impaired. Right? So, when you go in an elevator, there's Braille. Those things exist to support the people in our society to live their life more fully and participate and engage in the way that all able-bodied people can.
Okay, so right now we're talking about a physical disability.
Yeah, it gets much more complicated when we start to talk about people on the autism spectrum, for example.
Sure.
People with ADHD, people with mental health conditions. And yes, I see where you're coming from. Like, it's impossible to accommodate everyone.
No, I didn't say it's impossible. I just say that there's some folks.
It's utopian.
Yeah. Nothing is impossible. If we can conceive everything, it can be created. But okay, so let's compartmentalize for a second. I get what you're saying about the physical disabilities, and there's varying perspectives. However, perhaps we could say that maybe we're on a pathway to do so. I think that there's some progress, right? I'm sure there's much more. I don't live with a physical disability, thank goodness. But those that do, I'm sure that there's always more. But what you're suggesting is, well, what could shift if we start to listen a little bit more and create those avenues? But let's pivot to the which is more intriguing to me, is the mental emotional side of things.
So there's this saying in disability advocacy work, and really in all social justice work, nothing about us without us. And that's speaking to kind of the oppression that we have and the systems that we have in place in society where some people are in power and those people in power have the money, the influence, and the ability to create laws, rules, and structures.
Sure.
And those who don't. So what folks with disabilities are saying is that because we're not the minority, even though, you know, in Nova Scotia, for example, 30% of Nova Scotians have a disability. That's pretty high.
Wow.
But still not the majority, right? So the majority of the people who are designing buildings, workspaces, transportation systems, education systems, all the systems that we adhere to, those people aren't necessarily thinking about the people with disabilities. So advocacy work is about saying, nothing about us without us. Include us in the conversation so we can say, hey, that's a great design, but what about these people? Or that's a great idea.
Okay. So is it ignorance or is it people don't know what they don't know?
People don't know what they don't know. I would never, you know, of course there's ignorant people in the world, but, you know, we all are the center of our own story. I think one of your recent guests kind of said that, right? Like if you're not having a lived experience or you don't love someone or are close with someone that's having that lived experience, how do you know what that's like?
So what support is out there currently, to your knowledge, what support is out there currently even to support? And I want to hang out in the space of the mental, emotional side of things again, because I think we've skimmed over that, but there's so much more there. What support is there for the folks who are living with that, the folks who don't know they're and it's a stacked question, the folks that don't know that they're living with it, but more importantly, even the families. Like, it sounds like, and this kind of comes back to what one of your previous roles was, 18 to 30-year-olds, where you're intercepting a probable almost certain future. If you do nothing with these folks, they're going to be sort of ostracized to society and end up hopefully not dead, but the probability is probably pretty high at some point sooner than later, right? Families is never, I guess twofold. Let's start there. Like, what support is out there for families who are dealing with that?
Yeah, unfortunately not enough. There is a lot of onus that falls on the family, on the parents, on the caregivers to support these individuals financially, physically, emotionally, in every way. There are organizations where you can get like a personal support worker, and some of that, again, just keep in mind that all of my this realm for me is Nova Scotia based, so I don't know a ton about Ontario or other parts of Canada, but you know,
it does exist to your knowledge, though.
Yeah, like there are group homes for people with disabilities or mental health facilities. Yeah, so what we want to try to do is avoid what we would call warehousing, which is kind of how we dealt with people with disabilities and mental health issues in the past, was just to put them all in a building together and be like, well, here you go, this is where you're going to live for the rest of your life. So what we want to try to do is create an integration in society where these folks can, again, participate fully without barriers, be supported by society, be accepted by society, and live a full, happy life. So that's why these employment programs are so important, because there's lots of reasons why we work other than for money, right? And this is something that I really try to drill into my students, because 9 times out of 10, talk to any teenager that's doing something that they don't really want to do. Well, I'm here for the money. And we pay them for the program, and also we give them other incentives. We have like a game platform where they can play all these games and they get coins and they can buy things, and we play games and do activities in the workshops, and they can win gift cards and things like that. And we're also paying them for their time. And then when they go to do their work placement, they get paid as well. So we try to say, like, we're not just here for the money, and I don't want to hear that as your motivation. What are your goals, and like, what do you want to get out of this program? Because you, just like everything else in life, you get out of it what you put into it. So, you know, why are you here other than money?
And what do you oftentimes learn?
The social aspect is really important. Even though my program is virtual, we're all hanging out together in a workshop, and everyone is interacting with each other. And we do a lot of team-based activities to kind of work on that teamwork skill. And also I'm evaluating them, right? So I want to see them demonstrate the skills that we're learning. You know, contributing to society, like what do you want to put out in the world? Who do you want to be in the world? You know, these are young people with the world in front of them. Well, what do you want to do?
What happens? Okay, I want to interrupt you here because a lot of what it sounds like you're doing, you're coaching them a lot.
Yeah.
Right? You know, from every traditional or unorthodox position of coaching, it sounds like what you're educating, and I mean that's filling multiple buckets. It's fulfilling different roles. Is there not what happens? Like, okay, so I guess a couple of questions is that not a role in itself that perhaps these individuals need support with, especially if there's mental.
Yeah. So
I mean, listen, physical disabilities, I'm sure, would require coaching in its own aspect, right? And often, I think what's overlooked is sort of the cognitive abilities and the mental components of it.
Absolutely. So I work a lot in the realm of accommodations.
Sure.
What accommodations does this individual need? And it gets challenging because last cohort, we had 45 people start the program, and each of those people are an individual with an individual need, and you meet them where they're at. So we try our best to make the program as inclusive as possible and provide any accommodations that we can for a mental or a physical barrier.
How well does that take? How well do the
It takes a long time. So, for example, we went back into the curriculum and edited the language so it was simplified, because we found that we had some folks who didn't understand some of the big words that we were using. We went back and we made all these videos on how to use speech to text, because a lot of the assignments, what we call quests in the games that they play, are very literacy based. And we had some folks who couldn't really read or write. So then we had to rethink, okay, well, how do we make this more accessible for this person? So then we recorded what was written so they could listen. You know, we had a individual who was deaf, and we hired an interpreter for the workshops so that he could participate fully. And also we had that interpreter go with him to job interviews and to his job with him.
Oh, that's cool.
So the coaching, yes. What we do is everybody in the program is required to do a 1-hour individual session with one of us each week.
Okay.
And during those individual sessions, we do one-on-one coaching with each person based on what they need. So we help them set goals for the program. We help them identify what skills they need to work on. We help them with financial literacy. You know, maybe we're creating a budget. Maybe we're helping them figure out the bus system to get to work. Maybe we're helping them. We had some folks this year, we helped them fill out applications to the military because that's what they wanted to do after the program. So wherever they are, that's where we go. And, you know, I'm only in their life for a short time, but we want to support them as fully as possible during that time.
What happens afterwards?
Afterwards is tricky. That's the part of my job that sucks is what happened to this person? So there's another side to the society that I work for called the Youth Employability Program, and we have 3 outreach workers. So what I can do is if we have someone who needs continued support, I can refer them to that program, and then we work with them up to the age of 25, and they have this outreach worker who can, let's say, take them and buy pants for work or work shoes, or ride the bus with them to help them or they can bring them groceries, or they can help them with their resume or whatever. I mean, we do that stuff in the program, but anything they need, they go to them. Whereas I'm not doing that. So that's something that we do. We also try to do follow-ups with youth Like last cohort, we had a bunch of youth who got hired, which is an amazing outcome. We love to see that happen. And we follow up with them and just be like, hey, are you still at this job? Like, how's it going? I have a lot of big dreams for how to expand the program and add even more supports. But we just aren't there yet with the way our funding works and how small our organization is. But, there's always room for improvement. And I'm a big picture dreamer type person. So I have a lot of ideas for things like that. One being, on the job employment coaching, which I was doing at the other job where we had a smaller group of people.
What could that look like?
Going with a youth to their job for the first couple of shifts and coaching them in person while they're there, or going to them. So like if the employer comes back and is like, hey, we're having some issues with this youth, understanding or like following directions. So then I could go with them to their job and observe and support them to do the tasks that are required and help them understand what needs to be done, so that they can be a better employee. So we're not able to offer that at the moment, but we do virtual coaching. So if someone's having an issue, we would meet them on a video call and have a conversation about it and do our best to coach them that way.
How do you manage it all? Like at some point, you're doing a lot of work internally as an organization. Like you're doing resources, time, energy, physical resources are limited. Mm-hmm. I've just become curious, like, you talk about big dreams. What else could be possible that you're able to share?
Yeah, I mean, offering more in-person supports is definitely something that I think would be very beneficial. So like when the youth leave, we do a lot of feedback. After every workshop, we give them a feedback form to fill out. At the end of the program, we give them a feedback form. And a lot of what they're saying is like, make the program longer. And so there is another program in Nova Scotia that is a year long that's really similar. So we kind of sometimes refer them to that program, but it's hard to get into because it's limited. I think it would be cool to have like a longer work placement where we could offer more in-person support if needed. I want to run multiple programs would be a dream of mine with different focuses. So I would love to have a program just for queer youth. I would love to have a program just for Indigenous youth. I would love to have different programs run by representatives of that group. So, we would have an Indigenous facilitator and a more Indigenous focus, for example. Or a workshop just for youth with mental health concerns. Different programs catered more specifically to the youth, I think would be really great. I'd love to have one also for youth in the in the justice system, because that system's really hard to navigate. And we find that it's really challenging for the youth to kind of balance. And also, if you have a criminal record, it's harder to get some jobs, and how do you navigate that and those kinds of things. So I would love to run just more programming and reach more youth in different ways.
I'd be curious, like, this was an unsolicited thought coming your way. And it'd be interesting to see the feedback. If you got some feedback to say, hey, look, I'd like to learn more about financial literacy, right? Because these folks had probably zero financial literacy or not much of it. So what could it look like to get a bucket of folks together and then run a program with a specialized financial advisor? This is what you need to know.
Yeah, that would be great. So we do 2 financial literacy workshops during our workshops, but that is feedback that we get. And the purpose of that is because, well, kids aren't learning it in school, which blows my mind, really. And yeah, they don't have a lot of, and also for these kids, a lot of them, this is the first time they ever have money. Like, we're paying them to be in the program. We consider it a job. We ask them to treat it like a job. We have different expectations.
So they don't know what to do with it. It's like,
they don't know what to do with it.
If they get $20, they're going to go blow $20 on whatever they're going to blow $20 on.
Right.
Why can't we set up a program to say, the first $12 goes into a savings account. The next $8 is for yours to play with.
Yeah. And so, I'd love to expand that past the 2 workshops that we currently have on financial literacy, but I would never teach that.
No, but this is a call out to all the financial advisors out there to say,
yeah,
we talk about giving back. This is where we give back. This is where we co-create a program. I mean, I would throw this out there now. I'll volunteer my time to come onto that coaching program to say, look, folks, and there's nothing in it except that you're making a difference in the world.
Yeah, we love having guest speakers. We always have
Right.
a guest speaker for the mental health workshop. And I actually, a couple of cohorts ago, we always ask the youth, like, who do you want to hear from? And they actually said they wanted to hear from a financial advisor. And so we had a financial advisor on, and he talked about how the stock market works and how to invest your money. And they like loved it.
Yeah, but I want to go one step further. It's like, listen, big banks, you know, swing your dollars and cents, do
Fund my
something
program,
fucking
yeah.
useful for once in a while. And I'm calling you out because there's some big banks out there that do diddly squat. You know, get engaged and actually help open accounts for these folks.
Yeah,
Help do shit that's going to make a difference.
We do have a partnership with RBC, and they help us open bank accounts virtually for these folks, because that's another issue that a lot of these kids don't have any identification. So we help them with that in the program, and so does the youth employability program. But yeah, I think it'd be really cool. There's other programs that exist that train people for specific industries. Like there's one that trains people to work in hotels, for example.
Sure.
So I would love to do that with our program as well. And the financial, like let's have a bank fund our program to teach kids how to become a financial advisor, how to work in business, how to and set them up for a career path instead of just a job.
How about construction? Anybody interested in construction?
Tons. Unfortunately, at this time, our insurance and our liability doesn't cover youth working in that industry. We are working on that because we have had a few folks reach out to us and say that that's what they want to do. But in that situation, what we do right now is just help them find traditional work in that industry. So if we can't get them a placement because of our insurance and liability, then we would just help them find a job in that industry, and then it would just count as them completing the program. So if they complete the program every phase and at the end they get financial bonuses, and then we give them a laptop to use during the program because it's virtual and for accessibility, making sure everybody can access the program. And if they complete the program, they get to keep the laptop as well. So if we can't find someone a placement, for various reasons, it happens sometimes, we usually try to help them find just a traditional job, and then that would still count for them as their credit.
So interesting, right? Because there's a tug of war that construction professionals out there are saying, well, I can't get workers, I can't get good workers, I can't train people. Mm-hmm. And then yet, if you flip the script on this, I've got able-bodied, willing human beings, maybe with some sort of a disability, maybe not. Like there's some accommodation.
Yeah.
But so what? There's something that they can do. We just become curious and dig in and play to those strengths.
Yeah.
Right? And it still sounds like there's still a barrier with insurance. So I think that maybe there's something to unpack there in a future discussion. It just strikes a nerve. It's like, where there's a need, there's a solution to the need. How do we close the gap on that?
Yeah, and that's what I love about my work and my organization, and management at my organization is fantastic, and they're really encouraging with like ideas that we have. The funding is the issue most of the time, and the liability, just because we're working with young people.
So where's the funding come from? Like just full
Our
stop.
funding currently is from the Nova Scotia government, the Department of Community Services, which is why we get a lot of our folks from there. So it started out with just kids in the foster system, and then we just recently expanded it. Last cohort was the first one where we opened it up to anyone at risk, because we really wanted to reach more youth who are unhoused, for example, youth whose parents are on social assistance and maybe they need some support financially. And we do have a very small budget for supporting them with food insecurity issues, for example. But that's the thing about this program is it can be duplicated and augmented in a variety of ways. So in theory, we could run an entire program just for youth who want to work in construction, and we could augment all of the workshops to focus on that industry. We can do that for any industry. And that's what I would really love to do.
When we talk about construction, where's the gap? Is it knowledge? They don't know where construction is?
Are you talking about the youth specifically? Yeah, I think the gaps, are just that they're young and inexperienced and a little bit kind of idealistic about the way the world works. And that's actually something that I really struggle with personally.
What do you mean?
teaching these kids the way the world actually works as opposed to the way I wish the world worked, you know? How do I explain that? So there are systems in place in our society that are very inequitable. But a lot of these kids they're young, they're idealistic, they have high hopes, and then they get into a job and they realize the realities of working in this world. You know, you have to maybe commute for an hour. You're going to make minimum wage. You're going to be tired. You're going to have coworkers you don't like, all of these things. And also you're going to have employers who don't treat you with respect sometimes. That happens sometimes, right? So we also have to help them navigate working in the real world. What does that look like? You know, we do workshops on conflict resolution. We teach them about taxes. You know, this is something that you have to start thinking about, you know, deductions on your paycheck. You know, there's realities to working that I think young people, just because they're inexperienced, don't really understand. These kids have a ton of experience in other ways that you can't even fathom because of where they're coming from, growing up, you know, in the foster care system. But they're relatively inexperienced in understanding the realities of where we are in the job market. You know, this is something that happens really common because the transportation in Nova Scotia is not very good. Like we don't have a subway or anything like that in Halifax. It's like buses. If you live in a rural town, you've got nothing kind of thing. Sometimes they have to take the bus, 3 different buses, and they're on the bus for an hour and a half to go to a 4-hour shift and make minimum wage.
Right.
That sucks. Right? But there are realities that we all have to deal with in the way that our world is set up.
For right now, folks.
For right now. Right? And so sometimes the kids just come up against that and they're like, well, I'm just going to quit. I don't want to do this. Right? So that's a challenge that we're constantly coming up against. And those kind of, you know.
So how do you build resilience in that regard?
Yeah. So we teach them about being adaptable. And about mental health kind of awareness, self-care. We talk about resilience. And what I like to do is focus on goals and just be like, this is a stepping stone. Where do you want to go? Because everybody starts at the bottom.
Sure.
Everybody. And I tell a lot of anecdotes about how, you know, all the crappy jobs I've had in my life. And we always get any guest speakers that we have to talk about kind of where they started, because I really want these folks to understand that, like, I'm not getting you your dream job. That's not my job. My job is not to get you. And, you know, sometimes, honestly, we get people absolutely fantastic jobs that they really love and that suit them really well and that they stay at, and that's fine for them. But most of the time, we're just getting you into the workforce. We're getting you to understand, what do you like and what do you not like? We all need to learn this. And the only way to learn is by doing it the hard way. You go to work and, you know, some people love an hour-long commute because they sit on the bus and they listen to a podcast or they read a book or whatever and they don't care. Some people hate it. Well, which one are you? Figure out what your priorities are. Set goals for where you want to go. Break it down step by step, move forward.
You're talking a lot about a lot of work that even the general population of human beings don't do and yet need to do. The participants, the folks in your world, do they get it? Are they doing the work?
The amazing thing about young people today is, and this is why I love working with youth. I mean, it's extremely challenging in a lot of ways. They get mental health. They get it. Also, they're starting to get rid of all that bullshit around you're gay, you're not gay, you're black, you're white, you're whatever. Like, they don't care so much about that shit anymore, which I love. They're just like, you're here, you're cool, let's be friends. For the most part. Okay. You know, obviously we deal with like a lot of cyberbullying and things like that, but it's gotten they're just a lot more inclusive in general. a lot of the folks in my program identify as queer. We try to keep the program as diverse racially and economically and geographically as possible. Like we try to have a good split between like rural folks and urban folks. So I'm getting a little bit away from the question, I think.
So you sort of, but I'll bring it back. So what's the best part of your job?
There's two parts that what I love to do in my job is teach. I love facilitating, like being with the youth. But the best part is the feedback that we get from them when they say, like, you helped me. Like, you made a difference, you know? I've never had a job before, and now I got hired. Or, you know, when we make an impact on them that's lasting. That's the best part. Like, that's why I'm here.
So then taking that and sort of coupling that question and piggybacking it, I suppose I want to flip the script on the opposite end of the teeter-totter. What's the biggest myth that's worth debunking about the work you do?
That some people can't be helped.
Ooh.
Everybody can be helped. Everybody deserves an opportunity to thrive. These kids are working in a system that's broken and that is not helping them. They are discarded. They are cast away. And they're looked at, it's like that whole, like, you're a delinquent, you know? Like,
okay.
Some teenagers just do stupid shit and they have to pay the price for that,
so
you
now
know?
so this is going to come right into your ribcage. You're going to sort of open up and just break right through and say, for the folks out there who are listening going, Michelle, who gives a shit? Why do you even bother? Like, what difference can you make?
A huge difference. You can make a huge difference. Especially working with youth. I will say, because I work with adults, this is my first job working with youth. Adults are a little bit harder because they're a little more set in their ways. They have a little bit more responsibilities and things like that. But these kids, they don't know what they don't know. And the world is their oyster. So part of my job is to say, like, what do you want out of your life? Because you can have anything you want. And to encourage that, even though we know that there's barriers like money and, you know, geography and race and all of these things that they're dealing with, there are a million successful people with the same barriers who got shit done in their life that they wanted.
Yeah.
Be that person. How do you be that person? What motivates you? What inspires you? What keeps moving you forward? What do you want and how do you get there? And how can I help you for the 6 months that we know each other? What can I do?
It's true selflessness work. And that's what it is, right? I mean, it's never about you. You're not making it about you. And this is interesting. I think we touched on it and we didn't really unpack it, but this sort of just pulls on the heartstrings to say, this is what it is, especially in a society, in a world that's driven by money. And if you look at especially the US, but Canada as well, it's like everywhere you look, it's like, how can you make $1 billion? Who gives a shit? Sometimes I want to say, like, who gives a shit? Yes, it's a tool. Yes, it's there. Yes, we need it to create memories. I got all that. And this is the stuff that matters, right? Like, look at the impact you can make. Wow, thank you for sharing all that. That's huge. That's huge. So, abstract question now. You have a magic wand and you wave a magic wand and you say, what is, I don't know how to frame this properly. I guess, what does this program need? If you could wave that magic wand and say, what does this program need in order to tremendously thrive and make a larger scale impact? How do you answer that?
Money. I mean, that's the thing about money, right? Is for a long time, I had a really bad relationship with money and I thought money is evil. Money's not evil. It's like you said, it's a tool. People use it for different things. If I had a lot of money, I would help as many people and probably animals as possible. Not everybody would do that with their money. That's me. So if I want to expand the program in 50 different ways, like I talked about, I need resources for that, right? So at the end of the day, we're coming up against the financial limitations. And, you know, at our organization, we're always brainstorming different ways to fundraise and to get that capital that we need. But apart from that, I would say we have to get rid of our judgment in society. The stigma that exists around mental health barriers, around disability, around race, around gender identity, sexuality, all those things that we're always judging each other for, that's what I would want to get rid of and just be like, hey, we're people. And why do we have to worry about all of that stuff to be kind and supportive to each other? So I think the number one barrier that we have is just a judgment around the different, like what these kids are capable of. I hate when I come up against an employer and, you know, we don't advertise necessarily that these kids are in the foster care system, but it's on our website and we don't hide it. Right. Or, you know, I might say like this kid has a disability and they need this accommodation, or this kid has a criminal record and whatever. And there's a lot of judgment there. I would love to just have people give people a chance.
To have people give people a chance. That's huge. You know, and this is the call out, right? For all the folks out there, construction organizations are calling on you to say, like, listen, step up to the plate. There's a ton of them out there. You know, all the people who again, want to throw money at galas and golf tournaments and all the fluffy stuff to get your name out there. Do something meaningful. Give the organizations that can actually make a difference. And I think that there's a huge opportunity to network. I mean, great people make great things happen. And, you know, you touched on something that I think is worth illuminating. You know, I threw my hat into the bin, and I wholeheartedly mean that. And I think that there's a bunch of other folks out there that can throw their hat in the bin, a specialist to go on board and provide some sort of selflessness, coaching advice, whether that be financial, whether that be you know, life coaching, whether that be performance driven, whether that be whatever the specialty is, construction professionals. I think that there's a huge platform for that too, as far as education is concerned. Pretty cool. Like, I think that our world doesn't know what they don't know until they do. Like, I didn't know about this stuff. And not that it doesn't exist, but again, it's not in if it's not in your everyday realm, maybe it's ignorance, maybe it's not. But, you know, I can't fault some. At the same time, I'm not going to fault somebody for not knowing what they don't know. Mm-hmm. These programs that you're talking about, I'm assuming exist in Ontario as well. Again, self-awareness. What do these programs need? They need support. They need financial support. They need, you know, big names backing them. So thank you for all that. I appreciate that. Can I pivot to a couple of fun things?
Sure.
So, you know, knowing what you've learned about human beings, if you haven't already said it, is there anything sort of that's blown your mind about human beings that you didn't know and is worth sharing with other folks?
How resilient people are. Like, some of the things that people go through in this life are unimaginable. The pain, the loss, the trauma. And I think if we can cultivate more resilience, have more support for people going through those things, more people will make it through. But a lot of people do. Like, these kids especially, like, some of the things that they go through, and they just keep going. And it's not easy. It's not easy to get over that stuff. It takes a lot of hard work. But people are really resilient. And it's always inspiring to me, again, coming from such a privileged background, what these kids go through, and they just keep moving forward. They're so resilient. And I think that, you know, I saw that working on the front lines. I saw that with people with disabilities. People with disabilities who are in chronic pain and have to, say you have a visible disability and people are always judging you, or that's, creating barriers for you. They're some of the most positive people I have ever met. So that resilience, I think, is just something that is just always blowing my mind.
I think that's something to learn, right? I mean, if anybody who knows anybody who's going through even physical pain and you come across a person like, holy shit, you're always positive. Because you learn different things, right? But the optically from a distance is like, oh my gosh, that person is labeled. They're labeled.
Yeah. And we feel sorry for them, right? Like we have pity,
Yeah, you have pity, or you have like less than, like, oh, that person is less than.
Right.
Until you get to know them. And this is exactly what you said, like meet somebody where you're at and actually connect with them.
Yeah.
Right. So thank you for that. I think that, where I want to pivot this to next, and I know you're not a parent of children. Obviously ours just entered the space. But you're a parent to a variety of different dogs. Good on you for that. Angelina, she's got 3 dogs, Lucy, Charlie, and Sienna, and they're all dramatically different. One's, I don't know, hyper. One is old and large and pretty cuddly, and the other one is somewhere in between the all of them. But they all cause shit in their own little way. And I don't mean that in a negative way. They just all get into different things, right? As children do. So I share that because what have you learned about human beings, or as a dog parent? What makes good parents? What does it take to be a good parent?
It's, I'm not a parent, and this doesn't even really apply to dogs necessarily, but I would say listening. This is something that I definitely learned working with the youth, is just listen and encourage them to listen to themselves.
What do you mean?
I think even when kids are young, or if someone's nonverbal, there's ways that they communicate what's going on for them that we don't pay attention to.
Ooh.
And I think that when we listen to other people, that's when we start to understand where they are, where they want to go, what they want out of life, who they are, what's important to them. And I think some of the best parents I know just encourage their kids to be themselves. And that's so cliche and we say it all the time, but what I really mean by that is figure out what you love, what you're good at, and what you want out of your life, and don't listen to any of the other bullshit. Don't listen to the people telling you can't do it. Don't listen to society saying you need this much money, or you need to live here, or you need to do this, or you need to have a house, you need to get married, you need to have kids, you need to do all that stuff. All that stuff that we think we should do, or all those expectations that we have. Just forget about that noise. Find your passions. And I want to be really clear that I'm not saying that there are not barriers and privilege and things that exist. We're not all starting from the same place. But I do think that if people have more of a mindset of possibility, they'll find ways in which they can grow in the direction they want.
Thank you. And you said a lot there. So bring that full circle. What advice you give to people that how do you listen? How do you show up and listen to people?
Be present.
What does that mean to you?
No distractions. So, and I know you're big on this as well. When I'm meeting with my friends, I put my phone away for the most part. Do an activity, like do something together. We learn so much from each other. Yeah, we can sit and talk, but we learn just by, if you want to hang out with a friend, cook a meal. I did this with my friend the other day, and we've been friends for years, but we've never cooked a meal together. And we learned so much about each other just by cooking a meal together. Things that we like, things that we don't like. She learned that I'm kind of a clumsy person. She learned, these different things about me. I learned these different things about her because we were just like, let's do this together. Let's enjoy a meal together from start to finish. So yeah, I think just really putting aside that time, prioritizing the other person, and being present when you're with them, and asking more questions. Going, I think we kind of do this thing where we're like, oh, how are you? Oh, I'm good. This kind of like
bullshit response.
Yeah. Actually listen to how they are and actually want to know.
Interesting. And there's so much more there. I mean, that's just that resonates with who I am so much, because it's, what do we do opposite is we tell people to do. Stop directing traffic. I don't give a shit, truthfully. Sometimes I don't give a shit what your thoughts are. If you simply become connected and ask questions instead of making assumptions, so much is different. Yet there are many human beings out there that spend more time directing the traffic, making assumptions, and leading it in, and I don't say it in a negative ways, but self-serving directions, right? And because it's not right or wrong, good or bad. It's just that everybody's got different subconscious and conscious agendas that show up. So, okay, cool. Thank you for that one. How about this? What 3 words other than "I love you" always make you smile?
3 words only?
Well, okay, it could be a sentence. No, I mean, I guess my brain went to 3 words because "I love you" is 3 words. But what words or sentence or frame or phrase makes you always smile?
Let's go.
Ooh. Let's go where?
Anywhere. Let's go do something. Let's go see something. Let's go experience something. Let's go. That always energizes me.
I can see that. I mean, you sort of lit up when you said that. What do you think your future self will remember about who you are today?
That I'm trying. Like, I'm still trying to figure out what I really want out of life, I think, in a lot of ways. And what my purpose is. It's like, I know I want to help people, and I keep doing that in a variety of different ways, but I always seem to get stuck and feel like I'm not doing enough. I want to do more. So I have all these, big dreams, big plans for myself. And I think when I accomplish those things and I look back, I'll be like, okay, I was trying. Like I was figuring out how to get there. And I think I don't give myself enough credit for that on a day-to-day basis. I tend to be really hard on myself and push myself really hard. But I think I am really trying. And anybody who knows me really well, I think would notice that. Sometimes it appears that we're moving really slowly, but I know I'm always moving forward. It's important to me to always be moving forward. And I'm trying. I'm trying to be better all the time.
Which is cool. And that's something we don't do as human beings. We just don't give ourselves enough grace.
Yeah.
Shit sucks. Sometimes it sucks until it doesn't. We've talked about this inside this space on many occasions. And, we don't know what we don't know until we do. And some pretty cool stuff happens. So, all right, let's flip the script. Childhood for a few moments in time. Childhood memory that has helped shape who you are. There's something that something that I don't know, something that sticks in your mind is that was a defining moment for me. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind?
It's kind of a hard question for me to answer right now. I think I don't know if I can speak to one specific memory, but I think what I really learned overall, like we were pretty good about going out and experience. Like, I remember going to museums and things like that, and being curious, and I kind of have this kind of lifelong passion for learning, and I think that comes from just this kind of open curiosity and ability to kind of be creative and learn, always being encouraged to see what else is out there and learn and ask questions and figure out how things work and want to know more. I hope that answers the question adequately. It's tricky to think of a specific.
Well, maybe there is a defining moment. Maybe there it is, right? Maybe you succinctly sort of bucketed it all together and said from the transferences and the presuppositions and everything that they've carried forward, the overarching thought is that the importance of staying curious, right? You know, I mean, that's shaped who I am. I can tell you that much. So perhaps that's it. Perhaps it's not. All right. Favorite childhood memory, favorite thing to do with mom as a child?
Mom would take me to a lot of like museums and stuff like that, and I think that's where that comes from. She loves that stuff, and we still do that stuff when we travel together now, which is fun. Yeah, just like culture.
Yeah, sure.
That those cultural experiences, I think anything like that with her.
True. Still to this day, she can go
she loves it.
A ballet, an opera, an art gallery, you know, walk the park and read 1,000
any
plaques,
kind of, and like,
right?
I love history, and like I'm a huge history buff, and I read a lot of like biographies and stuff like that, and I think that comes from her, that kind of like, that cultural kind of stuff. Lots of stuff like that with her.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's still very much who she is today. Okay, favorite thing to do with dad as a kid?
Camping.
Ooh, what about camping?
Yeah, we used to go, when you're a kid, time is weird. It felt like a couple weeks to me. It could have been a couple of days but we would go every summer. I always looked forward to it. And we would go in this like large group with a bunch of different families, and it was like the best. Yeah,
what do you remember? Like, I mean, camping's interesting, and our family always does
ghost stories around the campfire, s'more, like classic Canadian camping.
Yeah, thank you, Ed Kalinskas, for that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so good. And then I became a camp counselor and told all those stories, and hiking, looking at the stars. That's some of my favorite stuff still to do to this day. I live out in the country, in the forest where the stars are, and that's what I love. So,
what do you think camping taught you?
Connection to nature is important. And, back in the day, we didn't have this connection with technology that we have now. So I think it's even more important now. But I truly don't feel recharged unless I'm in nature. So that connection to nature is what I learned from those experiences, is that we don't need electricity or computers or anything. We're hanging out with each other in nature. I could never be bored.
What would you change about camping if you could change anything about camping?
I don't know. Like, honestly, those experiences in my mind are so perfect. Would have done it for longer, maybe. I think we stopped kind of when we became kind of teenagers. Everybody kind of went their own way. And then we tried to kind of do it as adults. And, everybody just gets busy. But I think, and you know what? I don't do it anymore because now I live where I live. And so if I want to have a fire, I just have one on my property, or, I go down the street and I'm in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, just more of it, I think.
I think this is cool. Like, this is a real conversation. We were just having with our children to say, we have gone camping every year. It's a tradition, as you're aware of. We go every single year. And this year was something different. We said, we're going to whittle a stick. And it was like, what's whittling a stick? And I was like, holy smokes. We live in an era where marshmallow sticks are at the dollar store and you go buy a marshmallow stick.
Oh, no way. Yeah, we all had to. I remember getting my first like pocket knife, and now I was like allowed to have a knife and make my own marshmallow stick. And it was like such a thing. I talked about
when this came up was the Swiss Army knives, and I talked about Kevin. Thank you, Kevin Kalinskas, for every year. It was like, what's the biggest knife you've got, and the brightest flashlight, and we would. Today I think around a campfire we had an abundance of junk food. At the time, I don't think we did. We had marshmallows, maybe. We most certainly had marshmallows. I don't think we had s'mores at the time. I don't remember s'mores if we did. We had Jiffy Pop, but like just different experiences, right?
Yeah.
And those ghost stories year after year, they never changed, and yet every year they still had an impact.
Oh yeah.
So thanks to the folks out there in our world who created the camping. The camping experiences were actually pretty cool. I don't know how much longer I want to sleep on an air mattress in a tent, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah, but it's also just the the respect. Like, I have a deep admiration and respect for nature. And I think that comes from that as well, because I want to protect our forests and our lakes for future generations. I think that's really important, to be environmentally conscious. And that comes from that as well. It's just like, I want those experiences to be there for people who want to have them. And we're so fortunate to live in Canada, where we have a million, Nova Scotia especially, I feel very grateful because I have ocean and lakes and there's water everywhere. But just being able to have those experiences in a clean, safe environment is just, we're really privileged for that.
Thank you for that. Last 2 questions. If you could have lunch with anybody, past, present, or future, who are you having lunch with? Angelina, I like this question. This is like a new one that just popped into my head. It's been present the last.
So I have this game I play called Fantasy Dinner Party. Okay, so first of all, I love history way too much to just pick one person. I'm sorry, I can't pick one person. I actually have a super long list of people, and it was really hard for me to narrow it down. But here's what I have: Marie Curie. Okay. Does everyone know who Marie Curie is?
Yeah. We got head nods over here. That's cool. Yep.
If you don't know who she is,
Google her.
Yeah, you got to learn. Alexander and Elizabeth Hamilton. Also learn about the Hamiltons. Harriet Tubman. These are all people. I don't know that one. Sorry. Harry Houdini.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then the people who are still alive: Hillary Rodham Clinton, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Keanu Reeves, and Jane Fonda.
You're fired. The question was one person who you would have lunch with.
I told you. No, I can't.
How do you well, you can't have lunch with all of those people. Then I think of like the Batman table, where you go, I'll be around the table and, go around and have like an introduction and stand up and talk about who you are. And I mean, Keanu Reeves.
It's a dinner
what's Keanu Reeves going to say? Well, you want the red pill or the blue pill? Right? I don't know. That's what I think of when I think of Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves is an incredible person.
He actually is, but I think that in my mind, his claim to the Matrix was just phenomenal.
All right. Jane Fonda.
Okay, so why Jane Fonda then?
Jane Fonda is a firecracker. She's in her 80s. She's still super active. She's an environmental activist. She's been a feminist her entire life. She's also a fitness icon. She's probably, like, when I think about feminism, there's Gloria Steinem, Hillary, of course. Like, there's so many, but like Jane Fonda just sticks out as someone who really pushed the envelope for women throughout her entire life, and still to this day speaks out about it. The work that she does when she's making films and televisions shows always has a purpose. I just love her. I think she's so cool.
Thank you. Well, the last question, because I've asked you for 90 minutes and you've given me almost 100, so I truly appreciate you. It's the, one for children of the world. You got an airplane with that floppy banner flying behind it, and it's got one message to share with the world. What do you share?
Just keep going.
Just keep going. And as you said earlier, let's go.
Let's go.
All right. Thank you. This has been wonderful. You're an impactful person. I want to throw this out there because I think there's a lot of professionals out there who deserve the opportunity to get in touch with you. Financial contributions, folks, knowledge contributions, just get in orbit with great people. How do they get in touch with you? They've got questions. You've had an impact on me. You've had an impact on many of the audience out there. How do they get in touch with you?
Personally, I have my personal email address.
This is your show. How do they get in touch with you?
So you can email me personally at mishsayers, MICHSAYERS @gmail.com. If you want to learn more about the organization I work for, it's called SEED, Society for Enterprise Education and Development, SEED, SEEDNS.ca. That will direct you to me in the professional realm. I'm also on LinkedIn, etc. I think that's pretty good for now.
All right, folks, let's make big things happen.